because Parshas Ki Sisa has the Egel. And for good reason, you want to give the aliyah of the Egel to a Levi. Why would you want to give the Parshas Egel to a Levi? Take one guess.
Because they didn't participate.
They didn't participate. So for the same reason that when it comes to the Teichach, you don't call anybody up. You know, someone just goes to the aliyah. You don't call anybody up because you don't want anybody to be cursed. So when it comes to the Egel Azov, you choose a Yid who was not involved in the Egel, so you always choose a Levi. Problem is, the Parshas Egel is not the beginning of the Parsha. Because the way Ki Sisa works is, it finishes HaMishkan v'Kelov, right? Parshas Truma was the Mishkan. Parshas Tetzaveh was the Keli HaMishkan. It was the Miluyim, how to prepare the Koyanim for the Avodah. You have Parshas HaTomid, and you also have the Parsha of Mikta Kteres, the Mizbeach HaKteres, the inner Mizbeach. How does Parshas Ki Sisa begin? It begins with Machzah Shekel. In other words, today's Chitas and tomorrow's Chitas is very long. It's not, tomorrow's Chitas, the Rashis are not that hard. Today's Chitas, some of the Rashis are very hard because you have names of spices that you never heard of. Even if you know what they are in English, you still don't know what they are. There's 3 Nedavis. There's the Nedava of the 15 types, gold, silver, copper, different kinds of wool, and all the rest. There was the Machzah Shekel for the Adonim, there's Machzah Shekel for the Karbonis. But there was a difference. The Machzah Shekel for the Adonim were given only by men between the ages of 20 and 60. The Machzah Shekel for Karbonis, anybody wanted could give. Men have an obligation to give, but you could give Machzah Shekel for children. Women could give, anybody wants could give Machzah Shekel. So there were 3 Nedavis. That's how Parshas Ki Sisa begins, there were 3 Nedavis. Then you have the Kiyar, the water basin. Then you have the Parsha of the Shemen HaMishcha. You know what the Shemen HaMishcha is? The oil that was used to anoint the Beis HaMikdash, which was used exactly one time. Then you have Mikta Kteres, the laws of Kteres, which was done every year. Shemen HaMishcha was done once in history. And it says in Chazal, it's brought in Rashi, there was a special Nes with the Shemen HaMishcha. It was Yud Beis Lug, it was 12 Lug. It's not that much. And it's a whole question of how it was prepared. But the bottom line is, the Shemen HaMishcha was made from olive oil. There's different opinions how they did it. They soaked it in water, and then they put the oil on top of the water, so that all of the flavor, all of the samamonim from the Shemen HaMishcha would be saturated into the oil, and then they threw away the spices. You see, these are processes that people know. How do you make perfume? Right? How do you make perfume? How do you do these things? So people have been making perfume for a very long time. Shemen HaMishcha was a form of a perfume. It was a holy perfume with a very, very specific requirements, but it was a perfume. And people have been making perfume for a long time. Okay, in the olden days, perfumes were a lot more important than they are now because people didn't bathe every day. People bathed and they didn't have deodorants. People use perfume. People use perfume.
What about the Mishkan and the second list?
So the Shemen HaMishcha was a perfume, but it wasn't used to keep things smelling nice. It was used to anoint things and make them holy. It was used once. And the Shemen HaMishcha will be when Mashiach comes. It was hidden away together with the Aron. It's one of the few things that were hidden away together with the Aron. Oh, what's going to happen, I don't know. I doubt they used it by the second Beis HaMikdash. They didn't have it by the second Beis HaMikdash. They didn't have it. Just they didn't have the Aron, they didn't have the Shemen HaMishcha. So what's going to happen when Mashiach comes? We'll find out when Mashiach comes, but it's going to be around. And the ness of it was they used it, and after they finished using it, they had the full amount. It didn't diminish in quantity. The amount of oil that they used to anoint the claim of the Beis HaMikdash and the Kohanim for that week. And then historically they used it to anoint, every Kohen Gadol had to be anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha, and the Malchi Beis David, the kings of the royal family of David HaMelech, who were anointed after a machlokes, were anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha oil. Malchi Yisrael, other kings were anointed with a regular, a different kind of perfume called Shemen HaParsha. It was a regular perfume. But Malchi Beis David, David HaMelech was anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha oil. Shaul was not. Shaul was anointed with a pach. Pach means a jug. An earthenware vessel that had a different kind of a perfume called a Parshamain. Malchi Beis David were anointed with keren. Keren means a horn. They kept the Shemen HaMishcha in an animal horn. A shofar that wasn't open at the narrow end. That's where they kept it. And David was anointed with the Keren, with the Shemen HaMishcha, and the halacha was that they did not anoint Ein Moishchin Melech ben Melech. If a father's son were a succession of kings, they didn't anoint the son. Koyanim Gedolim, they anointed all of the Koyanim Gedolim. But the way we understand it was that in Man Bayis Rishon, the Koyanim Gedolim lived very long. In Man Bayis Sheni, they died almost every year. There were 280 Koyanim Gedolim in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. The whole Beis HaMikdash is 420 years. And you have to take off 120 between 80 of Yechon and Kohen Gadol and 40 of Shimon HaTzadik. It's a very short amount of, there were very few Koyanim lasted more than 1 year as Kohen Gadol. But Zman Bayis Rishon, they lived very long. But they anointed each one with the Shemen HaMishcha until the time of Yehoyash. When they put away the Shemen HaMishcha along with the other. And nevertheless, even after all those uses, if you would measure the amount of Shemen HaMishcha, you'd find Yud Beis look. It's as if it didn't diminish. Then you have Ketores. Ketores was made every year. Ketores is made every year. And I don't understand incense, right? This is, Shemen HaMishcha is a perfume. But the Ketores was a type of incense that was made from 11 different spices that are, we know it from the Gzeres HaKosov. Right? It says we say it every single morning. Kachlocha Samim is 2. Not of Shchelis V'chalbona is 3 more is 5. Then it says Samim a second time, so you do it twice, it becomes 10. And there's a cheshbon how you have 11. There's a Gezeres HaKosov that we know that we use 11 types, and the whole thing is halacha l'meishim b'tinai. We have traditions about it. I mean, every morning we say from 4 types there was 70 mana, and then from 4 other types there was 16 mana. It works out. 11 types of the Ketores. There was a whole recipe how it was made, and it was made every year. So Ketores was a regular part of the work in the Beis HaMikdash. There was a group of people who were schooled on how to make the Ketores, and you're not allowed to make it. If you make the Ketores in the same division of 11 spices, in the same amounts, you're chayav misa. And there's 2 in Yonim. I need a siddur. There's 2 right there. There's 2 in Yonim. One is that you're not allowed to make it, and the other is that you're not allowed to use it.
So I tell you to make it. Is it like I'm making it?
And
then if I get someone I want them to now light it.
But the Chazal say that in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, when the Ketores was buried in the Beis HaMikdash, Kalas did not need to be perfumed for their weddings. The smell was so sweet and so strong,
Really.
that if you were in Yerushalayim, so you didn't need to put on perfume, because the Ketores perfumed you. The reason I'm looking is because there's 2 things. The first is Shemen HaMishcha. The halacha is Ish asher yirkach kamayu v'asher yitem menu al zor. There's 2 lavim. You're not allowed to make the Shemen HaMishcha, and you're not allowed to use the Shemen HaMishcha. By Ketores it says Ish asher yaser kamaya lehariach ba. If you made the likeness of the Ketores for personal use, you're chayav misa. But if you made it for the Beis HaMikdash, it's allowed. The shaila becomes, what happens if somebody else made it? Are you allowed to use it? And I'm assuming it's b'chlal masayimana. But by the Shemen HaMishcha, it says 2 things. You're not allowed to make it, and you're not allowed to use it. But the Ketores says you're not allowed to make it for personal use. So all of this is the beginning of Parshas Ki Sisa. So you start off with machzah shekel, then comes the kiyid. This is all today's chitas. Then comes Shemen HaMishcha, then comes the Ketores, and then comes B'tzalel and Eliyav. The Torah tells us who builds the Beis HaMikdash. We spent 2 parshas plus describing the details of how it's put together. After you finish describing how it's put together, then you have to say which individual people were chosen to build the Beis HaMikdash. And it says in Chumash, the Mishkan, it says in Chumash that Hashem gave them genius. Hashem gave them genius to know how to put these things together. In other words, making the products of the Beis HaMikdash, in many ways, are very hard. To make the keruvim out of one piece of gold rather than soldering it together. To make...
Gold can be forged without getting it hot. You couldn't hammer it down.
I believe you. But the Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't make the menorah. They should make it for him. It's a simon that it's not so simple. I don't think Moshe Rabbeinu's problem was the design of the menorah. I think it was figuring out how to have it. It had to be kikar zov, to be a precise amount of gold in this and this size to produce this and this detail, and it was koyachol. Huh?
It probably wouldn't have been. Like if you look at a crown of a tiger, even then you see like there's little issues with the exact of the small detail.
So imagine the menorah was so big; it was made of solid gold. So the Eibishter gave genius. I had this idea, and I never saw this in any sefer, but I believe this, which is kind of stupid, right? You can make up stuff, but if you look at Bereshis, there are names of individual men mentioned. The father of music is mentioned.
Oh.
The father of metallurgy is mentioned. The father of animal husbandry is mentioned. The father of agriculture is mentioned. Their names. Give me a chumash. Give me Bereshis. I only have a shvois. In Sefer Bereshis, you have
This could be like
you have a guy whose name is
when did this happen?
Yovel. They were Kain's Kinderlach a long time ago. Avi Yoshev Mikne. He was the father of nomadism, of living with animals, using animals for life, for food.
Can I say what's the name was that? Hevel.
Okay, but this guy made it into a science. He would move from place to place. He would bring his animals. They would use the land. The land would be used up. They move to the next place. Today, people do this. Africa still. Then there's another guy. His name is Tuval Kayin. His role was Chodesh Necheshes Ubarzel, which Rashi says it means he made weapons. But the bottom line, he developed bronze. I'm assuming it was bronze. This is before iron, right? And then there's a third one whose name was Yuval, was Avi called Toifes Kinad V'Yugov. He made musical instruments. And later on in the Chumash, you have other people. People's names are mentioned in the Torah, and they're credited for creating certain fields of practical usefulness, mechanical usefulness. The way I understand it is, if your name is mentioned in the Torah, even if they were bad guys, they were geniuses. Hashem gave them an unbelievable natural ability to develop music, to develop metals into.
There are some people who are just mentioned like passing.
There's no such thing. In Chumash, the Taza Minzach. In Chumash, even in Shas, even if your name isn't mentioned, even if it just says a man, if you're mentioned in the Torah Shebeksav, you're a very important person.
Like what about, does it mention the name of the king of Yerushalayim who they kicked out?
Yeah.
So what did he do?
It doesn't matter, but if he's mentioned in the Torah, he wasn't just a passive figure. If he's mentioned in the Torah, they're, first of all, historic figures, and Vashenas, they represent things that are deeply spiritual. So getting back to my point is I believe that in the beginning of the Torah, when you mention these names of people with certain skills, they were like geniuses of geniuses. The smartest people in their fields. Problem was they were the first. So they developed it in what you would consider today very primitive ways. But the first person to make music had to be an incredibly sensitive musician to even know that he's hearing something beautiful. People came after him, they did it better than him, but they're only his children. He was the father of it. So I have this idea that when the Eibishter told Moshe Rabbeinu to make the Mishkan, and he gave him instructions about how to make metals into certain shapes, how to make fabric of different types and to create different colors and different patterns and all the rest. Maaseh Choshev, Maaseh Roikim. It's very hard to understand how Maaseh Choshev was made. Maaseh Choshev was woven together of a fabric made of thread. Each thread was multicolored. Each thread was multicolored. And the garment had pictures on it. How do you do that?
When you make the thread, you dye half of it.
Because each thread had the same exact design. Each thread had the same exact design. In other words, the mix of colors in each thread was identical. They didn't make different kinds of thread for different parts of the garment. And they didn't knit into the garment a pattern. From the weaving itself, they produced a pattern. How do you do that? It's a certain kind of, it's a chokhmah. It's a certain kind of genius of how you lay out the threads in the loom, I'm assuming. It's described in Chazal that on one side there was a lion, on the other side there was an eagle. Okay. So I've seen Mishkan V'Kela, the people who try to reproduce the Beis HaMikdash, try to make it look realistic, that it's not mamish a lion. But still, the ability to produce these patterns when you're using uniform thread of mixed colors. Each thread is exactly the same, of mixed colors, and you come up with a pattern. On one side you see a line, on the other side you see an eagle. It's a special skill.
Your children shouldn't see it if it's not kosher animals, no?
Okay, that's the kasha of Nebish. He didn't know good to see this. Anyway, but the vart is, there was a lot of skill in the Beis HaMikdash that was genius. And the Eibusha says, I'm going to give him special skills. So you could make a case, that there are forms of artisanship, forms of artwork today, with wood, with metal, with materials, that the founders of these fields were Pitzal and Eliyav and their teams. The Eibusha gave him special Ruach HaKodesh. This is a personal fantasy that I have. I have no proof of this. I just believe.
That doesn't sound so, because outside of just the weaving, everything seemed pretty normal to step back then. Or does it actually? No, maybe form setting was a new thing.
The way they used the metals, I think, was.
Also new?
Honestly, I don't know. If the Torah says, if the Torah describes what they were doing as being extraordinary, it was extraordinary. It wasn't because Yidden were in the midbar and there were a bunch of glumps. So for Yidden there was a pele. It was special. And you can make a good argument. And the way they wrote the names of the shvatim on those stones also, it's a chokhmah. I had this idea, this belief that the Eibusha gave them inspiration. In other words, just like the Chazal say, there should not be a metal called gold. It's too precious. Gold is a physical metal with spiritual properties. It doesn't tarnish.
No.
It doesn't rust. Think about it. It doesn't rust. What metal doesn't rust?
The stainless steel rust after all?
Alloy.
Huh?
Alloy, it's different.
Gold is a
Platinum rust?
And by the way, gold is also an unbelievable. Platinum's gold.
Platinum's not exactly gold. It has a higher melting point.
Gold has a conductivity of electricity. When the Gemara wrote those words, gold is the best conductor of all the metals. The most, what's the word I'm looking for? Friction-free wire is gold wire. You almost lose no power, you have no heat. It's a physical thing that the Eibusha made when he made the world, right? And of course the way they explain it in physics, about exploding stars, whatever. In other words, how heavy metals form. But gold has properties that in the time that the Gemara wrote, there was no way to know then that would have these properties. Today, when you want to make a very, very expensive machine, and you want to be very, very efficient and very precise, and it shouldn't overheat, you use metal, you use gold for the wiring. So gold has very special properties. So the Chazal say that the world did not deserve to have gold. Why did the Eibusha give us gold? For the Beis HaMikdash. Once he gave us gold for the Beis HaMikdash, so the whole world has it. And there's a famous story with the Rebbe Marash, that there was a chassid who came to the Ar Rebbe's grandfather, the Meir Shleimeh, and he complained to him that the Rebbe Marash lived like a rich man. And he complained to him, it's inappropriate for a Rebbe to live like this. It's pasnish for a Rebbe to live lavishly. It doesn't look good with the role. And by the way, by the time that Rebbe Marash passed away, there wasn't 2 nickels in the house. His wealth was a inyan pnimi. His children were very poor. The Rebbe Marash had a lot of wealth. He used it up. The Rebbe Marash was not in business. People think the Rebbe Marash was in business. He wasn't in business. He won a few lotteries. I mean, when you have Ruach HaKodesh, it helps. The sweetest thing about the lotteries in the Rebbe Marash is, in the Rebbe's Rishimis, we now know that Tzemach Tzedek used to buy lottery tickets, the Rebbe Marash used to buy lottery tickets, and the Tzemach Tzedek wrote pidyenis, a pigeon, a pan. I'm asking the Eibusha that my son should. The Tzemach Tzedek wrote a pigeon nefesh for geld. He bought a lottery ticket, his son bought a lottery ticket, and he wrote a pigeon nefesh that the Rebbe Marash should win the lottery. And he won he had a lot of money. But he used it. And it was gone. It was an inyan pnimi. The whole Rebbe Marash's geld was a nyan dezach. It was something else. That's how it appears. I mean, it's for sure true, but the evidence also points to that. Because he didn't save it. He didn't reinvest it. When he passed away, he had fancy things in the house that were very expensive, but there was no food.
His carriage.
The Shabbos asked him, Pashat. Anyway, so some guy complained to Reb Meir Shleime, how you talking that Rebbe is living so rich? So he told him that the Chazal say that the world was not worthy of having gold. Even gold, as of Ela B'Shvil Beis HaMikdash, gold was created for the Beis HaMikdash, but once it's created for the Beis HaMikdash, anybody could use it. And he said to him, Petach, fool, in our generation, who do you think that means? The gold is made for the Rebbe Marash. So I'm saying another thing. Just like it's true of gold, it's true about these chokhmas. It's conceivable that there are techniques of manipulating physical materials in this world to make beautiful fabrics, and to make beautiful furniture, and to make beautiful architecture that are traceable or not traceable back to Betzalel and Aliyah. The Eibush did inspire them to build the Beis HaMikdash. But once these chokhmas came into the world, you can use them to build castles and palaces and whatever you want. It's just a personal theory. But the Torah speaks at length about Betzalel and Aliyah, and of course the big chap of Betzalel and Aliyah was that the Eibush took from Reisha B'Shvatim and Shafach B'Shvatim, right? The two people, the two-member team that was assembled to lead the team of craftspeople who worked on building the Mishkan. One was from Shevet Yehuda and the other one was from Shevet Dan. From the greatest of the Shvatim and the lowest of the Shvatim. To show that we're all equal. When it comes to building the Beis HaMikdash, we're all equal. But when it comes to two things, all Jews are equal. Men and women also. Matan Teda and being a Mishkan. The women were spoken to first. And when it comes to the Mishkan, it says, the women came first. So it wasn't exclusive to men. The building of the Beis HaMikdash did not have to be done by men or women. But the leaders of that team, or those teams, were Betzalel and Aliyah, and the Eibush gave them Chochmah. It's a whole series of psukim. It seems like it was a big deal. The Torah twice in Parshas Ki Sisa, and the next week again in Parshas Vayakel. And by the way, for those who care, I looked. Here goes a piece of good news for all of you. Drum roll, not necessary, please. Vayakel and Pekudei are separate. For those who worry about Bava Zedre, Vayakel and Pekudei are separate. They're not long. The longest Parshas combined, and I don't think it's even close, is Matas Maseh. It's like 240 psukim. And they often fall together even on a leap year, because by that time of year, the fact that earlier in the year was a leap year doesn't make any difference. Because when you get to Shavuos, it's always Bamid Benaseh. So after that, it simply has to do with Hamarish Basas, you have till Rosh Hashanah. So you can have, even this year, Matas and Maseh together. That's a long Mavased. That's a long.
How long is that already over?
244 psukim.
The longest single parsha.
This together is around 200. I think it's even less. Pekudei is less than 100 psukim. Vayakel is more than 100 psukim. I don't know. You can look. I don't have it in front of me.
How long is Nasai?
Nasai is 176. Yeah, it's longer than many double parshas. So Pekudei is Tzadik Beis, and Vayakel, it's pretty long. Kuf Chav Beis is 122, 214. 214. It's pretty long. Vayakel was pretty long too. But Matas Maseh is longer. But this year it's separate. Okay, Vayakel is long, Pekudei is short. Any case, so you have a whole description about who builds the Beis HaMikdash. And the Torah repeats again all the names of every one of the Kalim. And it's repeated like 4 times, right? In Parshas Truma you mention all the Kalim. In Parshas Vayakel, Pekudei, you describe how they're built. But between Parshas Truma and Tetzaveh, where the Kalim are described how they should be made, and Vayakel, Pekudei, where described how they should be made, twice the names of all of the Kalim are mentioned. Once in our Parsha, where Hashem says to Moshe, take Betzalel and let him make this, and this, and this. He reads the whole list of items. And the beginning of next week's Parsha is going to happen again, where Moshe Rabbeinu is going to say the names of all the different things that they're going to build. So it's repeated 4 or 5 times. The different parts of the Beis HaMikdash, which is a shaila unto itself and a discussion unto itself, because in each place the order is different. Each place the order is different, and you can learn so much from the order. Right? You know this, right? There's a difference between, what was the first thing Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to make? The Aron. What was the last thing Betzalel actually made? The Aron.
How did he get in that?
What do you mean, how did he get it in? He opened the doors, he carried it in. He felt, how could you make the holiest keli if no place to put it? So the shaila becomes, why did Abishai make it first? So there's a nigla to it and there's a chassidus to it.
Well, the fact that Achashverosh did go to the throne and then the palace.
Okay, well that was because he was Achashverosh. I mean Shlomo Melech. It was modeled after Shlomo Melech's throne. But okay, and then comes one more thing. For those of you who have lost track, this is all today's chitas. All of this is today's chitas. Machzah shekel, the kir, the parsha of Shemana Mishcha, the parsha of K'teres Hasamim, the parsha of Betzal and Eliav, and before the parsha of building the Beis HaMikdash finishes, there's one more thing. What is it? The answer is Shabbos. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael es ha-Shabbos. Laz es ha-Shabbos. The Reis of Yisrael, Beini vein b'nei Yisrael, Eisi li'elam, ki sheishes yamim, asa l'shem, l'shmayim v'sa'aretz, v'yem ha'shvitz. But I think there's a whole parsha. Shabbos. Right, what does that tell you? Even serving Hashem has a rest. Even serving Hashem has a rest. When Shabbos comes, you're not allowed. It's a whole parsha. Ach as a place. It's not two psukim. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 psukim describing Shabbos. And by the way, you should know like this. Shabbos is a funny thing. It's repeated over and over and over again in the Torah. Shabbos is repeated more than anything else, right? But after you learn all the parts of Shabbos, you don't have a single clue how to keep it. Because the Lamitas Malachas are not mentioned in Shabbos at all. There's a lav, you're not allowed to make fire. There's a lav that you're not allowed to go out of your place. Pick up
sticks.
And there's a third one. There's a third malacha that's mentioned in the Torah. I don't forgot what it is. Maybe Tetzah and Tchubin, but there's 3. And all the rest of the Lamitas Malachas is all Teresh Balpeh. And then, after all of that, it's finished. Moshe Rabbeinu is in the mountain for 40 days. And if you take the Torah literally, in those 40 days Hashem told him how to make the Mishkan. He probably told him a lot of other things also, but the record. And when Moshe is, at the end of the 40 days, Hashem gives him the luchas. And then the next pasuk starts the Egel. So tomorrow's Chita starts, Vayiten al Moshe kachaleise. Hashem finishes making the luchas. And he gives it to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe is going down the mountain, and just around that time, the whole fiasco with Egel Azov ensues. So today's chitas, the beginning of Parshas Ki Sisa, and I would say that today's chitas is probably a quarter of the Parsha. Today's chitas and tomorrow's chitas is together much more than half the Parsha. Like I explained to you earlier, because we want to give a Levi the Parsha of the Egel Azov, because the Levim did not participate. I was once in a shul, there was no Levi. Couldn't find a Levi. So what you're supposed to give a kohen to Elias. What if you have no kohen and you have no Levi? You have to give it to Yisrael. So I once was able to read. I got the Aliyah of the Egel. We couldn't find anybody else to do it, and the guys were afraid to take the Aliyah. I took the Aliyah. I'm a bad Jew. You give it to a Levi, and they're in the Parsha of the Egel Azov, right? Now, and of course that's a whole story. It's a whole story. How the Eibusher wants to destroy the Jews, and Moshe doesn't let him, and there's a whole negotiations. It happens over a period of time. So what I wanted to talk about is the end of the Parsha. The whole Parsha of Egel Azov unfolds, and it interrupts the story. Hashem gave us the Torah, right? When Hashem gave us the Torah, He gave us a very important mitzvah. What's the mitzvah? You have to make the world a home for Hashem. You can't just live in this world and try to run away from it. That's the Hemshech HaDvarim. You go out of Mitzrayim, you become a free people, you get the Torah, and you build Hashem a house. You're not finishing serving Hashem until you make this world a home for the Eibusher. It's interrupted by the Egel. It's interrupted by the Egel, which is a big scar on the history of the Jewish people. It's a big scar in the Chumash. And it affects how everything is going to play out historically until Mashiach comes. The Egel Azov is almost as important an event as the eating from the Eitz Das Tevara. It changes everything. It changes our relationship with Eibusher, changes Torah, changes Ruach, it changes everything. At the very end of the Parsha, you go back to how the Parsha started. That Moshe is coming down with the second luchas. And Hashem tells him to write down the Sefer Torah. In other words, when he came down the first time, he came down with the luchas. When he came down the third time, Hashem gives him the second set of luchas, which Moshe excavated from the bottom of his tent. Remember that? Moshe had to find the psal lecha, the second luchas. Moshe had to take out of the ground. The Eibishter put him there, but Moshe had to take him out of the ground to bring him up the mountain. And the Eibishter carved the Aseres Dibis and second set of Luchas. So the Michtav was Michtav Elikim, the Ksav was Ma'aseh Elikim, even though the Evanim were Bepashas, not Ma'aseh Elikim. And Moshe is told now, write the Sefer Torah. And he comes back down, and we all know the end of that story. That Moshe Rabbeinu's face was radiating. And the Jews couldn't handle it. And Moshe puts on a mask. So Chazal say, Rashi says, Bo yurei kama koicha shel Aveda. Look how powerful an Aveda is. Before the Jewish people did an Aveda, they looked at the Shechina and they had no trouble. After they did an Aveda, they looked at the Kanei Hoyd of Moshe Rabbeinu and they couldn't handle it. It was too potent. It was too powerful. It was a big Aveda, yeah. But if you read the story, it sounds like not that many people were involved. It wasn't as widespread transgression as you think. I have a great story of the Rav, of the Rabbi Soloveitchik. You heard of the Rav, Rabbi Soloveitchik from YU? He was a Gaon Olam. He was a very deep Chacham. And he knew a lot of Torah, and a lot of Chachmas as well. He was the Rosh Yeshiva. So the Rav knew the Rebbe from Berlin. And he had a relationship with the Rebbe, a long-standing relationship with the Rebbe. They considered each other friends. He considered the Rebbe his friend. They were about the same age. The Rebbe was 2 years older than he was. And they knew each other from Berlin. Anyway, he was convinced by I don't know who to come to the Fabrengen of Yud Shvat Tavshin Mem. The Rebbe's 30th anniversary of the Nesias, the Rav came. It was a very big cover for the Rebbe and a big cover for the Rav. You ever saw the videos? The Rebbe wouldn't sit down. The Rebbe walked in, the Rebbe knew he was going to be there. The Rebbe waited for him. The Rebbe came in late, so he should have his seat first. The Rebbe walked in, he stops and he shook his hands. The Rebbe walks to his seat and stands. The Rebbe doesn't sit down until he does. He was supposed to stay for half an hour. He stayed for a couple hours, which was unusual. He was an old man. And when the Rav stood up, the Rebbe stood up. And the Rebbe walked over to him and gave him shalom. And the Rebbe wouldn't sit back down until he left the room. The Rebbe remained standing. So the whole shul stood up. When the Rebbe stood up, the whole shul stood up. And the Rebbe wouldn't sit till he left. Which is an unbelievable covet. A kid said, when he got back into the car, so he had one of his Talmidim with him. One of his, he was a big famous Rosh Hashiva, big Talmud Chacham. A Gaon was with the Rav. So first of all, when he got into the car, he says, what does the Rav say? So Rabbi Soloveitchik said, it is a Gaon, it is a Godel, it is a Manig Yisrael. He's a Gaon and a Godel and a Manig Yisrael. He said, very nice. The Rav was very impressed with the Rebbe. He knew the Rebbe. But a Gaon, there's a Godel, there's a Manig Yisrael. But the next day, somebody came into him, could be it was a Lubavitcher, and he said, what's the difference between a Rav and a Rebbe? What's the difference between a Rav and a Rebbe? You listening, Shimshon? Yeah. He says, a Rav has smich, he teaches Torah. A Rebbe has the Kanei Hoyd of Moshe Rabbeinu. Has the glow, the radiating glow of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Rav said, I knew the Rebbe from Amol, but last night I saw the Kanei Hoyd. That's what his word. Last night I saw the Kanei Hoyd of Moshe Rabbeinu. But in any case, but what I wanted to talk about, which of course, the way these classes go, you never end up talking about what it is you want to discuss, is the idea that you're not allowed to write down Torah Sheba'al Peh.
What?
The idea that you're not allowed to write down Torah Sheba'al Peh is in our Parsha. And it ties in, just like Shabbos that I mentioned before. Goyim don't have Shabbos. Because although Shabbos is written in the Torah over and over and over and over again, if you read all the time that Shabbos is written in the Torah, you don't know how to keep Shabbos.
So we should curse out the sparkles.
So the same is true with the whole Torah Sheba'al Peh. Aksev es advarim ha'ela ki al pi advarim ha'ela karati itcha b'ris v'es Yisrael. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, write down these words. So the Gemara says, Ksev zois, these words you have to write, and the rest of the words not allowed to write. Which means like this, and I want you to see about it in realistic terms. When Moshe came down the mountain the first time, Hashem gave him one thing. The Luchas Sabris, the tablets. When the fiasco of the Egel happened, and Moshe had to excavate the stones out of the ground, and Moshe went up a second time with those stones, and the Eibishter wrote on those stones was the Seres HaDibros. When Moshe came down the second time, or the third time, the Eibusha says to him, now you can have a luches, the Torah in stone, and you can have the Torah Shebiksav, which is the Sefer Torah, and you can have the Torah Shebal Peh. And Dvarim Shebal Peh, Yate L'chaisam. You're not allowed to write down Torah Shebal Peh. And that's the basis for the historic fact that Yidden did not write down Mishnah and Gemara for almost 2,000 years, for a very, very long time, for 40 generations, Lavina Navashi. Because it's an Issa Deiraitz that they write down Torah.
Why did we write it?
So this is the famous question. And this is a question which historically repeats itself. It repeats itself first why they wrote the Mishnah, then why they wrote the Gemara, and then why they wrote the Rishonim. And you should know this is part of the reason that a lot of Sfarim are written in Rashi Eisius, including the Zohar and other things, because there's an understanding that if you write it in different letters, it's not so bad as if you're writing it in Eisius with a voice. And then finally, the printing press. The printing press was a whole new dimension of registering Torah, which was supposed to be Baal Peh. And we know stories from Gedolei Yisrael that printing Sfarim, the Frierdiker indicates that printing the Shalah Kodesh Eitz Min Boys may have been the cause for the Gezeres Tak V'Tat. Printing Sfarim, when the Zohar was printed, the publisher of the Zohar was printed in the year Shin Chof, which is about 450 years ago. 450 something years ago. Yeah. There's a Haskama printed, a long Haskama, and the Haskama explains what Kabbalah is, but part of what he writes is how he's not afraid to print his Zohar. It was a sakana. So the answer to all of those questions, and again, if I had more time, we could talk about it a little bit more, is this rule called Eis Las Eis La Hashem Eifeidu Teira Secha. That sometimes, in order to do for God, you have to destroy the Torah. Bein HaKadosh saw the Torah was going to be forgotten, so he wrote it down. Eis Las Hashem Eifeidu Teira Secha. Huh?
Very odd. As a Chabadnik, I'm very surprised you're not mentioning Chassidus.
That what?
Every single Rebbe went to prison, or X happened.
Because of the Yuluyim. Okay,
Yeah.
fine, yeah. But the place where this ties into Chassidus would be, first of all, the saying Chassidus, second of all, the writing and publishing Chassidus. But in Tafshin Mems, in the 80s, the Rebbe said take every Sefer Chassidus that was printed in Rashi letters and reprint them in regular letters. He took off the Peda completely. The only Sefer of Chassidus which was printed in regular Eisius was the Tanya. All the other Sfarim printed in Rashi Eisius in the old country. And in America they printed Eisius, they retype the Torah, retype the Likutei Torah, retype the Derech Matzasecha, retype the Eira Torah, retype all the Sfarim of the Mittel Rebbe, which were all printed in Rashi Eisius. You know the first Tanya was printed in Rashi Eisius? Are you aware of that? The first print of Tanya was Rashi Eisius.
They have copies in the library?
It's available. I've seen it. I've seen it in more than one copy. It's easier to get the first print, so I've had to print in later ones. Anyway, so if I had more time, I would bring with you about one of my favorite subjects, the 3 levels of Torah: the carved Torah, the written Torah, and the oral Torah. And the quotable quote is: the carved Torah is all front; there's no back. The Torah Shebiksav has a front and a back, and the Torah Shebal Peh is all rear. It's all acheraim. The face of Torah is Ruach HaKodesh, and the back of Torah is Chochmah, is understanding intellectually, Seichel. So the Luchas Abyss is Kulei Ponim, the Sefer Torah is Ponim V'Achar, and Torah Shebal Peh is Kulei Achar, Avon Avasaga. And the Eibush gave us a mitzvah to learn and understand the Torah. All it is the Parshas Ki Sisa, and it flanks the Egel. And mit das da Egel. Okay, thank you for coming and listening.